Hello and welcome to this episode of the No Gimmicks Just Sweat podcast. First, thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you're listening. Also, make sure you follow us on Instagram at No Gimmicks Just Sweat. No Gimmicks Just Sweat was started to showcase people from all walks of life sharing their particular fitness journeys. Everyone has a different story, and everyone has a different reason behind their journey. Hopefully these stories will not only inspire you, but also help you aspire to heights you've never thought possible. Again, thank you for listening, and now, let's get it started. Welcome to No Gimmicks Just Sweat, and today we have Sophie Lambert as our guest. Sophie, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being on the show. All right. So as we start all the shows, I'm going to ask you a couple of icebreaker questions to get things started, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Morning runs or evening runs?
Morning runs. I think there's been a little bit of a joke, though I'm not an early morning runner, but my stomach does not do quite as well with evening runs. And I love just getting my run done.
Okay. All right. Road runs or trail runs?
So I would say I probably do the majority of my running on the roads. But I love trail running. I find it, especially if I'm by myself, a great way to just connect with nature and to appreciate, the beauty around me. But I do probably the majority of my running on roads. And I also love gravel roads and dirt roads. So I'm always kind of searching for new places to run.
Cool. All right. Solo runs or group runs?
So again, I probably do the majority of my running by myself. But I'm lucky. I live in a small town in Virginia, and we have a pretty vibrant running community, and I've made some really good friends through running. So I enjoy the social aspect, especially during the pandemic, of running with one or two friends. And then in training, I've actually also really appreciated having people to run with for workouts. So a bit of both, I guess.
Cool. All right, run on a treadmill or run outside?
Definitely outside. I feel like the treadmill is a little bit of my nemesis, but I love being outside. I mean, I'll run in the snow and the rain, maybe not lightning, right? But I do love running outside.
Definitely not lightning. yeah, lightning is not a good idea. All right, what's your favorite distance to race?
Oh, that is so hard. I ran track growing up, so I kind of have this secret spot for the short, fast stuff, even though, of course, it hurts so much. But I think the marathon is really special. It's, such a challenging distance. So I don't know. I'd say I don't really have a favorite. I do love racing. So maybe it's more that, throw me in anything and I'll try to make it fun.
I hear you. All right, if you can go on a run with anyone, that's a celebrity, a famous athlete, an entertainer, dead or alive, who would it be?
Gosh, that is so hard. I did notice in some videos that were on social media that when our new Vice President, Kamala Harris, got the call from Joe, she looked like she was out on a run. So I think it would be pretty cool to go for a run with her and just kind of hear her story. She lived in Canada for a while, and so did I. And just hear what it's like to be, such a powerful woman.
Cool. All right, last question. Dream location you would want to go for a run at? Anywhere in the world?
Wow. I think I'd love to go somewhere that's high altitude. I think I, on a work trip once, ran in Denver, and I think I almost died. So I think it would be really cool to kind of experience the challenge of running at altitude, but not just for, a 1 or 2 day work visit, but, that experience where you could go and be there for a few weeks and just see, how hard it is at first, and then are there any adaptations to your body? I think that would be really cool. So I don't know, does that mean St. Moritz, the Alps, or maybe Flagstaff or Boulder? Something like that would be really cool.
Cool. All right. So, as we start the show, we kind of want to start with your story. And think of it as your origin story. Think of it as like you're a superhero. What's your origin story? How did you get to be from point A before you started running to where you are now as a runner?
So it starts quite a long time ago. I have this vivid memory as a little girl. And, I mentioned I lived in Canada, but I also am originally from the UK. So I was born in London. My parents are British. And, we don't have in London, if you go to school in London, you don't have a big playground. Like, you don't have anywhere really to run around. You might just have a small area to play football or soccer, our soccer, right? But they would take us to a park. And I have this memory, I was probably about 7 or 8, of being taken to a park somehow. I have no idea how we got there, and we had to go run. And I kind of beat like a lot of the boys and was one of the first kids to complete this loop in a park. I have no idea what the distance was. And of course, everyone was like, "Oh, you're a good runner. You should run." And was invited to this kind of little track team that our primary school had. And I remember running these kind of sprint races in a track meet. And then my mom and I moved to Vancouver in Canada, and my elementary school, I was in grade 5 or 4, grade 5, I think. So 5th grade, we had a cross country team. And so that kind of sparked competitive running for me. And I did it, those last couple of years in elementary school. We'd have like 5 or 6 meets against the other elementary schools. And I really loved cross country, and, my best friend in elementary school and then secondary school also ran as well. So it was both social, but also something, this kind of physical challenge that I enjoyed. And of course, all of us who were running cross country were also running track. And in Canadian spirit, I went to this secondary school. So it was 7 through 12. We were all together. So we would go to these track meets with the 17 and 18-year-olds and watch how fast they were running. So I loved both disciplines. I played a little bit of tennis also and was just a very active kid growing up. In track, I ran the 1,500 and 3,000. I remember vividly running 1 800-meter race and saying never again. But I joined a track club and kind of ran during the summers. I really think, though, with track, I peaked at like age 13, 14 when I went to our provincial meet, and then was never as good again. I think some of this is maybe going through puberty, right? So I kind of peaked at age 13, 14, and then cross country, I went to our provincial meet once, but I was just kind of like middle of the pack cross country runner, but did love it. Then I moved to the States for university. I went to a small Division III liberal arts college in Massachusetts and had really thought I was going to run. I went to the very first meeting with the coach. She was quite an intimidating figure. She coached cross country, indoor and outdoor, and I'd never heard of indoor track. I'm like, what is this? Will you run inside? And she basically was probably trying to weed out those of us who weren't 100% in, and basically said every single weekend while you're in college, you're going to be at a race. And I had actually already started to feel anxiety before races. And so I think it was just too much. I was like, you know what? I think I'm just burnt out. So I ended up not running in college, which sometimes I look back and regret a little bit, but mostly it kind of enabled me to focus on my academics, but also play some other sports. So I played JV tennis for a couple of years. I played ultimate frisbee, which probably was very helpful for endurance. And then I also played a sport that's popular in Canada, squash. And we would have to go on the track occasionally and do a workout. And I would be lapping people, and even my coach, and he would be like, why are you playing squash? Like, why aren't you running? So that was kind of funny. Then I went to grad school, ran just for fun. So I've always kept running, but, maybe once a week or once every couple weeks versus now where it's 6 or 7 days a week. Moved to Washington, D.C. And then I must have somehow caught the running bug again. I can't really remember what did it. Maybe it was some of my ultimate Frisbee friends because I played on a club team in DC for several years there. And some of those friends ran. So I think it must have been with them. And I started doing some races. And I would just kind of be thrilled if I ran a 7-minute mile in any sort of race at these kind of shorter distances. And then I think I had a coworker who was training for a marathon, and I was very curious. I thought she was nuts, but I was curious. Like I definitely was wanting to know more about what she was doing. So I ran my first marathon in the spring of 2006. That was my best marathon. It was super hilly. It was in DC. And then I ran 3 more. I trained for a few extras, but of course it's really hard to complete a training cycle healthy. So I had a couple injuries or I was just super sick, but ran a couple more. My last marathon was Chicago of 2009. Then I took a 10-year break. And now as I've kind of really come back into running, I feel like there are a lot of runners, especially women, maybe mothers, who've taken this long break. And in a way, maybe it's an advantage, right? Because we come back maybe hungrier, more disciplined, able to balance things better. So I came back. I had my first child in 2011. Ran during my pregnancy, obviously not racing, but just running, trying to stay healthy. Ran 1 half marathon after she was born, and then nothing until kind of the fall of 2018, where a good friend of mine in my town had run Chicago, and oh man, she, just hearing about it made me miss that world that just had been this kind of gap in my life. So I was like, okay, I'm going to jump into a workout with you. And it was a track workout in December of 2018. And man, I almost died. I quit halfway through. I was like, I'm so unfit. I'll never be fast again. And of course, you just have to show up and be consistent. And I did get fast again. And so I started training for a half marathon, just a Hal Higdon plan, right? That's what I'd used before. So I was like, sure, I'll use a Hal Higdon plan again, and trained for a half marathon. And then found the Charlottesville Track Club. The town I live in is about 35 minutes from Charlottesville. And they had a training program for a marathon. So I was like signed up for Chicago 2019, trained with the track club, and they have a very dedicated coach who writes a plan for like hundreds of runners. It was pretty amazing. Ran Chicago and beat my time from when I was in my late 20s. So I was thrilled. Oh, wow. And it just kind of, showed me, you're back, you love this. This is really an important part of your life. And so since December of 2018, I've been running and training and just have fallen in love with running all over again.
You were in love with running and you just took a break and then you came back.
You're right. I mean, I probably never stopped loving running, right? Like I'm obsessed with the Olympics and would, follow the runners and, all of that. And
yeah, that was the question I was going to ask. During that break time when you stopped running, did you still follow the sport?
Yes, not as obsessively as I do now, where I could probably rattle off 100 elite runners, what club they're with, what their PRs are, and all that kind of stuff. So, but I did. I mean, and if at that point I was still living in Washington D.C., so we moved to this small town about 8 years ago. But there are a lot of races happening. So during my break, I'd see a race happening. I'd be like, oh, I wish I was running that. So I think it's always been an important part of me. And I think that just getting out for a run, you still love running if you're doing that. You don't have to be training hard to love running. So,
exactly.
It's just a difference between kind of running for fun and fitness versus setting goals and really working hard to achieve them. And I think both have had a role in my life. And I'm just in a phase right now where, all right, I'm in my early 40s. What can I achieve?
Right. All right. So looking at how you trained before when you first started running and how you train now, what's been the big difference?
So I'll compare when I was training, let's say for I think it was a 3:25 was my first marathon. And I just, had this piece of paper, the Hal Higdon intermediate plan, and I would just mark off what I did, right? So did I do this run? Check. No tracking of miles or paces. I don't think I maybe went on a track once. I kind of have this memory of running up some kind of gnarly hills in DC a few times, but I mean, it was basically just a lot of running, and I had just my little Timex stopwatch. I would do a run, and I would either have mapped it out before or after to see what distance I ran. And I had a few routes where I knew if I got to this light post, it was going to be a 7-mile run. So it was just so different from our GPS era. I mean, I definitely have recollections of running with a Walkman, and then I was so amazing when I got a little shuffle and could listen to music. So I mean, these are the realities of those of us who are masters runners, and we look back on running in our 20s. But I remember, I certainly missed some runs. Probably didn't care about that as much as I do now, and I also had no idea what pace I should be targeting. I didn't really do tune-up races. I didn't have any sort of race plan when I did my marathons. I really wish I had splits, because I know I probably went out way too fast in all 3 of those marathons that I did back then. And now, I run 6 or 7 days a week, and run my easy days quite easy. I often kind of do a 9.5 or 10-minute mile to get started. So, maybe that's a slightly less resilient body, right, that I have now. I didn't know what a foam roller was back then, or weights, really, right? So I think I take care of myself more. I'm not going out and going to the bars on a Friday or Saturday night like I did back then. So I think training now with children, a more demanding job, and just the discipline and perspective and patience of being, 15 to 20 years older.
Okay. So how did the pandemic, affect your training and running?
So at first it was really hard. I would say in my, parenting, relationship, my husband was tackling a really challenging renovation project as his job this past year. So all of the parenting and kind of virtual schooling fell on me. I have a 3rd grader and a kindergartner. So back then they were in preschool and 2nd grade. Doing virtual learning with a preschooler was very challenging, especially while I was trying to do a full-time job. Trying was the key word there. Everybody was very understanding because so many people were tackling this. Of course, I felt very lucky to have had my job during this whole time. So I know I'm lucky, and it's, it feels silly to say how hard it was, but it was hard from a time management and, just mentally draining kind of perspective. So I had this, I'd say kind of like March of last year, all my spring races got canceled. So I kind of had to process that. And I had maybe 4 weeks where I didn't really run. I felt short of breath. I think I was under a lot of stress. I don't think I had COVID. It hadn't really come to my town that much then. I mean, the fall was a very different story. So I wasn't really running. I kind of just was finding things hard. Then was like, okay, I'm ready to start running, and just tried to get up earlier and head out the door before everybody kind of got up. So I started running again. It was all by myself, of course, back then. And then the McCurdy trained group organized a series of mile races. And I'd say a few runs where I was like, I'm going to go for some Strava segments. And that brought me some fun and joy. So it was Strava segments, kind of helped me build a little fitness and kind of just an appreciation for running again. And then training for a mile race, which, I don't know, I'm so silly. But after Chicago, I ran a half marathon maybe 5 weeks later, and then found a track mile race. So it was at Liberty University in Lynchburg, and they have a beautiful banked 200-meter indoor track. And, as I've mentioned, I'd never done indoor track before. So I had 1 mile race under my belt. in December of 19. And of course, this one you had to run outside on the roads. And I live in a very hilly town, so it was super hard finding a flat stretch. But I found a pretty good mile stretch on a sort of busy road, but if you run in the morning, it's not terrible. And so I did 4 mile races, kind of time trials, really. And training for that was really fun. And my Charlottesville track club coach, his son is a high school coach, and he gave me some workouts to do. So that was kind of when the joy of running came back to me during the pandemic.
Okay. And I hear that a lot from a lot of people is that, they really appreciated running for the art of running, over the past year, not having any races, just being able to get out and just enjoy it.
Yes. And I think at that point that started happening to me. So I started finding gravel roads out in the countryside. Maybe kind of late summer, started doing some social runs with friends again. I did some awesome trail runs. I live near the Appalachian Trail. So I'm in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. So we have mountains on both sides, and there are some really epic trail runs. So it was great to kind of occasionally get to do that. Of course, my kids were still home. So it was this incredible juggling of time management. But yes, I kind of found the joy and the why again after having like a little bit of a rough patch.
Okay. So let's talk about your go-to running shoe. Everybody has a particular shoe that they love. They're like, okay, this is the shoe I use. This is it. What's yours?
Okay, so I pronate. I have flat feet, and I'm starting to get some pretty some bunions, shall we say. So I definitely pronate, and that's been a challenge all the way back to high school. I was actually told at one point by a podiatrist I should stop running, which I didn't want to hear, and ended up getting a second opinion and was told, no, it's okay to keep running. But that's a challenge for me. And so I do the majority of my runs in a stability shoe. The New Balance 860 has, logged many, many miles for me. And I have an insert in it. I don't have my kind of grandma orthotics anymore. I have a Power Step insert with a little metatarsal pad on my right foot, which is, I haven't quite figured out what causes it all, but the right foot is the one that pronates more. It's kind of interesting. And often I'll have more niggles or little aches on my right side. But then for a long time, that's all when I started back again in December of 2018. So I was pretty much only running in stability shoes, and then slowly realized, oh, wait, there are all of these specialized shoes. So it's kind of, in many ways, I've kind of, I'm an experienced runner in some ways, but because I've come back to it so much later and everything's changed, I'm kind of a new runner in some ways. So I have enjoyed some racing flats. I'd say the New Balance 1500 has probably been my favorite in that category. And then I decided in my training for a marathon this spring. So I just ran a marathon maybe 3 weeks ago. I ran in the Saucony Endorphin Pros, and oh my gosh, when I first put those on, I was like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I get to run in this? The Nike Alpha Flies I tried on at the running store, and I just laughed the whole time I ran, tested those out. So that was a little too much springiness for me, but I love those Sauconys. I think about them. I think that's a pretty special shoe. It worked really well for me. I was very, very happy with them. And I think, sure, there's this efficiency while you're running, but the recovery after my marathon was staggeringly different than after Chicago.
Okay. So you just recently ran a marathon, and I'm safely assuming this is the first marathon, since the start of the pandemic. So how was it for you?
It was the first marathon since the pandemic. So it had been, I guess, a year and a half approximately. And I had trained for a half marathon in the fall that was put on by sports backers in Richmond. It was definitely more of a kind of time trial vibe. So it was pretty awesome being part of a race. I mean, there were 3 waves of us. So I actually ended up running pretty much by myself the whole time, but it still felt like a race. It was in Chesapeake, Virginia, so near Norfolk, on a very flat trail, kind of like a road beside a canal in the Dismal Swamp. So it doesn't sound like the best place to run. And it ended up being a day that did get a little bit warm, I'd say, for the second half. So that certainly impacted all of us. But, we kind of knew it was going to be warm. So I think everybody, you could at least affect what you wore and how whatever your hydration plan was going to be. But yeah, I set a PR and I didn't quite stick to my race plan as well as I should have, but I was really thrilled with the result.
Congratulations on that PR.
Thank you.
All right, so next question is going to be kind of a 2-part question. Your proudest moment as a runner, and then your worst moment or biggest mistake you've made as a runner.
Oh, wow. Proudest moment. I mean, sure, results you can be really proud of. I think for me, though, it probably was kind of what I've achieved since July. So in July, I decided, okay, I'm going to invest in myself and hire a one-on-one coach. Like, let's do this and have full accountability and have somebody really push me, right? Because the plan I did with the Charlottesville Track Club, no one was checking on my paces. No one was holding me accountable. I just had to do that myself. So I started working with Heather McCurdy from that McCurdy Train group that, a friend of mine trains with them, but also I think they did such a great job with that mile race series. It was great to start working with her. So I think I'm probably proudest of the consistency and kind of pushing my limits, right? When I was training for Chicago, I was running 5 days a week and pool running 1 day and then had a rest day. And I think I maxed out at maybe like low 50s mileage wise for a week. And then training for this most recent marathon, started running 7 days a week with a super easy day, the day after my track workout, like 3 miles. And then kind of got up to about 70. So I think this realization that you can keep pushing yourself, age doesn't matter. I think I'm proud of that. And then what mistakes have I made? I mean, I've had some silly little injuries since I've gotten back to running. I played pickleball in my running shoes, and I think I got runner's knee as a result in my Chicago buildup. I think comparing myself to others and then maybe that leading to, again, race anxiety, pre-race anxiety. I think I started to conquer that. I didn't feel anxious before this marathon, but it's not a mistake. It's a reality, right? We want to do well,
right,
but we put pressure on ourselves. So I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I'd say that's something I'm working on.
Okay. All right, let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about faster as a masters runner.
Yes.
And that's how you and I connected. So explain that to the listeners, what it is exactly.
Yeah, so, masters runner, in some circles it's 35 and over, but I think typically in the States it's 40 years and older. You're actually classified as a masters runner, and we have our own set of awards after a race potentially. And I came back to running, right, in 2018 as a 41-year-old. And I'd say that I don't think I had the growth mindset I needed. I definitely thought I might have limitations because I was older. And that's wrong. Not everybody gets faster as they age, but for most of us, there's no reason why we can't. And faster is very relative. But I guess it was last fall, so during the pandemic, I was just kind of wanting to connect with other runners who were, also in their 40s or 50s, other masters runners who were working really hard and setting goals and doing their best to try to achieve those goals. And I would see that some runners would either put it in their profile on Instagram or tag themselves with a hashtag Masters Runner. But what I was also finding was that, not huge races like Chicago, but smaller races, I was being beaten by these amazing women in their 40s. And not to go into any race expecting that I would be first in my age group, but I think I always have a goal of trying to be, top 5 in my age group. But these women were placing in the top 3 in races. So I just kind of really started processing all of this and realizing, whatever I've achieved at Chicago, a 3:18 marathon, I can go faster than that if I want to. I need to train hard. I need to be consistent. I need to avoid injury, but there's nothing to limit what I can achieve. Obviously, like we all probably have some sort of limit, but that was a really cool mindset to adopt. And so I thought, why not try to highlight some of these Masters runners? There was a really cool series on Instagram, and I think the woman, I think her name is Sarah Ibbotson. I think she started a website too, but she highlighted all these women who were trying to qualify for the Olympic trials, and they missed it by like seconds or a few minutes. And I loved that series. So I thought, why don't I try to do something sort of similar with Masters runners? And oh my gosh, there are so many of them, and they're so inspiring. So I called it Faster as a Masters Runner. I try to highlight a Masters runner every Monday. Occasionally it's on Tuesday. But people have really enjoyed it, and it's enabled me to connect, with people like you, with so many other Masters runners. Some of them are duathletes like you who also do a lot of running. Some are triathletes. A lot of them are runners. I think I'm going to get to highlight a Masters long jumper soon. So it's cool. These people are pushing themselves, and I think there's a lot of community, and a lot of the runners that I've connected with on Instagram who are in their 30s are also really enjoying the series. And maybe for them it shows, turning 40 is no big deal. I can still keep really pushing it. So started it in December and have highlighted 29 runners. I have so many people on my wish list. And I don't know. I don't know how long I'll do it for, but I certainly want to do it for at least a year. And there's no shortage of inspiring runners to highlight.
Oh yeah, you'll never have a shortage of runners. Believe me.
Maybe I'll just keep doing it. Just never stop.
Yeah, you'll never have a shortage.
Occasionally, I regret calling it Faster as a Masters runner, because for a few runners, that's maybe been like, I don't want to be highlighted right now because I haven't PR'd since I've become a Masters runner. And, I try to highlight runners of all different abilities, right? Like some are new runners, some are, thrilled to, run a 4-hour marathon. And, some of them are running 2 24 marathons. So it's a real range. And, sometimes I think I should have just called it like Monday Masters runner, but I want Faster to really be whatever that individual runner considers their achievements and goal setting as a Masters runner.
Yes. All right. With that in mind, what's your message to people who say it's too late to start? I'm in my 40s. I got family, job responsibilities. It's too late for me to start running.
So I would say, why? Like, here are all these examples of, many runners starting in their 40s who keep showing up. They're consistent, and they are getting faster. So, whatever your goals are, I think if you just keep going, especially those first several weeks where it's really hard when you start running. But if you find your community and you find the running friends or group or training group that inspires you, I don't think there's any reason to set limits.
Okay. Where do you see yourself as a runner in the next 5 years?
So I would love to still be running and hopping into races in 5 years. There are some pretty amazing runners in their 50s who are setting world records. And, I'm not saying I'll be doing that, but I want to keep running for the next 5, 10, 15 years competitively, like in my age group. I'm really enjoying that. I don't know, Eric, it's a big, hairy goal, but I would love to break 3 hours in the marathon. So that is a goal. And I don't know how fast I can get in the mile or those shorter distances, but I want to keep tackling those also. And then I don't think I want to run an ultra, but I do want to maybe start doing trail races. I've never really raced on trails, and I think that would be pretty awesome.
I started doing trails a little bit more, especially during the pandemic, and I'm actually enjoying it. It's a little bit more tranquility running, a trail, no cars, no real distractions, just you and wilderness, woods.
Is it hard to learn how to go fast downhill?
I will tell you from experience, and yes, I've fallen. Yes. I have scars on my knees now. You have to really change up your running style. Whereas on the road you might take long strides. You're taking much shorter strides. You're looking more down. Whereas they always tell you to look up when you're running on the road. You're looking down to see what's in front of you. And when you're running downhill, you really have to be careful, where your foot lands. And it also depends on where what's on the trail. If it's a rocky trail, if it's a lot of sticks and branches, because you can easily slip.
Well, that's really cool. And I think it just shows how versatile our sport is, right? That, you can set these challenges, and there are all of these new ones. And I think Des Linden and her 50K world record, it shows that, right? Yes. Like here she's setting some new targets, knocking them out of the park. And what will she do next?
Exactly. All right. So what is a non-running fact about you that most people know?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably I can stump most people that I am British, right? I don't sound British at all, but occasionally.
No, you really don't.
Occasionally I'll pronounce something, and in a funny way, and people be like, "Oh, what? That's funny." And then actually in my day job, I'm an urban planner, and I work for a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. So I work remotely, and we use Lego and Duplo blocks to simulate, building a neighborhood. So I think that's always something fun, kind of unique, right? My children think it's wild that I play with Lego and Duplo blocks at work.
Mom played with toys at work.
Don't steal ours.
All right, if we come to the end, what's next for you? Are you training for anything now, or are you getting ready for any?
So I'm just coming out of my recovery period. My coach is really awesome. She's very, very mindful of recovery and adaptation and kind of a pause after a training cycle. So I took 2 weeks completely off, and then I'm in my 3rd week right now, where it's just kind of running for fun. So I'm anticipating that whatever speed workout I have next week is going to hurt really bad. But I've signed up for a 5K just to kind of have something fun. It's a great local race at the end of April, and then a 10K at the end of May put on by the same race organizers, the Tidewater Striders, who put on the marathon that I did. I was super impressed with them. Top-notch race director and volunteers. So they have a 10K with a pretty competitive field. I'd like to see if I could maybe PR in the 10K, but it might be super hot, so maybe I'll regret saying that. And then I got into Berlin for 2020 in the lottery. And with my friend Monica, who lives in our town, who's actually how I heard about you, Eric. She loves following you. So we were so excited to do that. Obviously it didn't happen, and we're in it, deferred for this year, this fall. It's in September. And of course it feels very unknown if, people are going to be allowed to visit Germany, right? I couldn't go tomorrow. Right. So we'll see what happens with that race. And then trying to decide if I sign up for Boston. And again, like, will that race look like? Even what we're expecting it might look like now at 20,000 runners. So those are kind of the two target potential marathons. But if not, I think I would just try to find a smaller, more local marathon in the fall.
Okay. Sophie, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. It's really nice to connect with you, and I'm enjoying your podcast very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And if anybody wanted to connect with you, how can they do so?
So I haven't started any sort of website for the Faster as a Masters Runner series. It's solely on my Instagram, which is at runner_Sophie. So that's it in terms of my presence online. But I am enjoying connecting with, runners of all ages on Instagram.
All right, cool. Again,
thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too. And that's it for this episode of No Gimmicks, Just Sweat. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for your support, and until next time, keep crushing your goals.